And I want to say you are so dear. Many of you have said in recent days, I sure wouldn't want your job these days. And I see heads nodding in agreement. And I have to tell you, I appreciate your sentiment, but I have to tell you, I find these days very energizing. I'm grateful for the focus on important questions. What will happen here? We don't know what will happen. But as many of you have, some of you have been preaching through Acts, and I've been reading through Acts. And I'm reminded of Gamaliel in Acts chapter 6, and didn't know what was going to happen, but said, let's not kill these people. If what's happening is of God, then we can't stop it. And if it's not, then it's going to peter out anyway. And so Peter and the apostles were not killed. They were flogged, but they weren't killed. I don't know what's going to happen, but what I do know is that whatever we decide to do, and the spectrum is great, isn't it? I mean, not so much that we've heard it here, but across the denomination, if you've been reading anything, it ranges from people saying, got to hang together, people saying, we've got to get out of here. We've got to bail out of this. The reactions are all across the board, and who knows where any of us will end up. But the thing that is incontrovertible is that whatever we decide to do, we're going to decide together. And so we really need each other. And I pray, and the council will design things so that in the months to come, we will have opportunities to get to know each other better. I have to admit to you, it has dismayed me over the years that we have voted on very important matters for one another, like the calling of pastors, for situations where we don't know anything about that church. Sometimes we're voting on some of the most important things in the lives of one another, and we really don't know much about each other at all, or about the mission context in East Los Angeles, which is part of our Presbytery, and Boyle Heights, or what's happening out in South Orange County. People from other parts don't know what's happening out there, and yet we vote on one another's most important issues. We really need to know each other. I loved, if you all got to hear Gary Demarest speak today, I loved his reflections on his wish that he'd spent more time getting to know people who are different from him during the course of his life. It's an older guy reflecting wistfully on what he wished he'd done. I believe that there is tremendous value in that. And so the council invites you to come to some events that are coming up. The first two are coming up soon, next Wednesday for pastors at 11:30 at Trinity, and then 2 Saturdays after that for elders and other church leaders, also at Trinity at 9 o'clock in the morning. We need to get to know each other. What grieves me, more than it grieves me, it hurts me, is when I watch us speak and think ill of each other when we really don't know what we're talking about. We've heard about things that someone may have said. There have been things that have been said about some of those who started this movement, the fellowship, and the letter that has been sent out. 2 of our pastors, Doug Rumford, Rich Conwisher, were signers of that. It was a very public deal. And they have received scathing criticisms and the attribution of intent that was never there. The way the whole thing became public was not their plan or intention at all. It was a leaking of information to the Presbyterian layman that caused a need for a kind of reaction that was not at all what was intended, but all kinds of uncharitable things have been said and attributed to these pastors who were simply trying to figure out as best they could how to figure out a way to stay in and stay together and stay faithful. We're all struggling with this. And I love that we're struggling with this. But it is wrong to draw conclusions about folks without talking with one another and going to ask, did you really say this? On the other hand, my dear friend Gary Collins is sitting right in front of me, and I love this brother so much, and he has had so much attributed to him that is just ridiculous. Gary Collins, as he has served here, has been one of the most faithful and one of my favorite presbyters also. I've heard people say, oh, well, that over at St. Mark, they probably, as soon as this is done, they probably got a closet full of gay people. They're just waiting to ordain right away. I've actually heard this expressed. There is no such thing happening. There is no such plan. There's concern been expressed over the years about Gary and, because of his personal convictions, how he might function among us. And there were questions even cast when he was the moderator of the Committee on Ministry about, now he's got this opportunity to press his agenda on other churches. And friends, I have to tell you that during the course of Gary's time as moderator of the Committee on Ministry, he was an absolutely phenomenal and fair and wise moderator. And in that seat, he sat in many interviews when we considered new pastors coming into the presbytery. And in every instance, what Gary's primary concern was in that interview was what will be best for this congregation. It was never, is this a chance to get a more progressive person in there? Can I influence this? It was never that. But it was always, what is the best thing for this congregation? And in the course of a call, people were selected that were people with whom Gary would disagree seriously on theological issues, but Gary's response was, this is a good call. This is the right person for it. This is a good fit. We've done the right thing here. And yet he's been suspected of agendas and of intentions that are simply not there. So my appeal to you is to please come to these next meetings that we have, the first two that are happening in the next few weeks, and then other opportunities that will be presented for us to get to know each other. And when we do have questions, to go to one another and have candid, truthful conversation with one another. Because the kind of judgments that we make about one another, when we don't really know, but when we judge people because of what they look like or who they've associated with or what we think they may do, it leads to horrible, horrible things. And I'd like to share one story that comes to me every year right before Easter. And it was in 1942. And my mother's family was living in a farm over near the LA harbor. And in the springtime, it was time for them to prepare to go to the internment camps. And so on a Saturday morning, they packed their goods in the car and drove to the Santa Anita racetrack, where they entered the Santa Anita racetrack. And they lived there in stables for 6 months, with up to 19,000 people at the height of the population there, and then spent the next years of the war in Arkansas, as did 120,000 other Japanese American people. They were proved not to be enemies. They demonstrated their loyalty to the country, but they were judged because of what they were suspected of, because of what they looked like. My only point in sharing this part of the story is that judging one another because of what we think we know about them is sometimes deadly and has devastating consequences for generations. But we can talk with each other. And in this presbytery, we have better relations here than than almost any other presbytery I know. I have to tell you that my EP colleagues around the country are talking about horrible fighting and paranoia in their presbyteries. And I feel so blessed to be here. I feel like we have such an opportunity to model something healthy. And finally, I just want to say, as the conclusion of that story about my mother, she's today a very, very happy and blessed member of Trinity United Presbyterian Church, whose life has been transformed by the love of Jesus Christ. She and my father are grace-filled, gracious people. They don't have any resentment. They've been transformed. I served as the pastor of a Japanese-American congregation where the majority of the members had lived in the camps. I began that ministry in 1988. There aren't as many of those survivors left anymore. But I can tell you this, the ones who were really angry, the ones who were most bitter, they're dead. The ones that I still know are sweet. So I urge us, whatever kinds of fears and angers we may have had or projected towards one another, that we need to be released of that. We need to let those go. And we need to come and have honest conversations with one another. So please, on next Wednesday, invite pastors to come. There'll be a way to sign up that we'll post on the website. And then all the rest of all y'all, I learned that in the South, all y'all, are welcome to come on Saturday, June 4th. So, regarding your sympathies that you sure wouldn't want your job right now, I got to tell you, in some ways I'm more energized than ever because we're good people in a good place, asking good questions about the future. And we need to do these discussions together. So I'm in a good place. The other reason I'm in a good place, if you recall in November, I stood before you weepy because my daughter was away. Our first child was away at college, and I was grieving, and I thought I was going to die. And the moderator very impolitely laughed at me out loud. And she said, nah, I will never forget that, Madam Moderator. But she's more experienced, and she was right. And I tell you, my daughter right now is about over the continental divide flying home for the summer. And we survived the year. And I really did think I was going to die. It just hurt so badly. I love her so much, and we are that close. Of course, those of you who are more mature than I and have experienced this knew I wasn't going to die, but it felt like I was dying. I'm just being candid with you. There are things that happen to us. There are seasons we face when it feels like we're going to die. But I put my stake with that wise old Pharisee Gamaliel in Jerusalem and trust that God is at work in this. And I love my job right now. Gary's still going, I can't believe it. A number of you keep saying I wouldn't want your job for anything. But I am grateful to work with the colleagues that I get to work with the leaders that we get to work with together. And because I trust in God, I have great hope, and I'm grateful for you. So please come to these next meetings. Pay attention. The issue St. Andrews has brought will engender more conversation. Pay attention. We'll be bringing those opportunities to you.